Um, so it's more of like as they pop up, um, like as they talk about stuff, I'll write what they say and then just thoughts that come about it. So, and then when I listen to the recordings, I'm like, okay, yeah, I did make that connection. I made this connection, blah, 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 this and that. So, all right.
Okay, ready when you are.
All right, let's go.
And so we continue. In this discourse, will discuss the birth and the nature of the ego and its energetic purpose. It will be important to note how the ego is represented in current thought, which is that it is to be dissolved, that it blocks you, and that it stops you from attaining enlightenment. The old story of the Buddha sitting underneath the Bodhi tree and Mara, the mistress of illusion, the temptress, to arise, to attempt to block his attainment. Eve with the apple, suggested by the serpent. Current New Age philosophies on the ego is that it is something to fight, something to resist, something to undo. And yet we tell you that if it was not part of your mind, it would not exist. So it has a purpose. Understanding its purpose and its limitations is most important. It is not the enemy you think it is. And no matter how many times you choose to fight yourself, you never win. And so this is one we suggest: put your weapons away and listen to what we have to say. To look at it in a whole new way, a new teaching of understanding. And so we begin with the birth of the ego. The ego is your companion in this life. Its purpose is to make sure you can function in life, that nothing comes along to disturb your reality in such a way that threatens your ability to attain your basic needs: food, shelter, water, companionship. Yes, companionship is an essential need. A question we will add here is, what would you sacrifice for acceptance so that you know you're not alone? Would you connect to something hurtful just to know that you're connected? Relook at your relationships that you have forged in this life and ask that question again from the observer state of mind. And you may be shocked at your answer. how you have allowed yourself to be hurt repetitively, because the one hurting you at least lets you know you are not alone. And while there may be better opportunities or choices, jobs, relationships, relationships within jobs, friends, family, how many say they truly don't want to go to Thanksgiving? Then why do you go? Oh, right, obligation. Or is it the chance to connect with the family? Would you do better without that yearly influence? And the answer is always yes. I spend weeks shaking off the bad vibes after Thanksgiving. But what you haven't asked is, why do you go? And the answer is, because I'm unwilling to not be connected to my family. I'm willing to accept being hurt so that I am not alone. You value that connection more than you do yourself. Harsh words. But again, we challenge to take a look at your relationships previous past. Why did you stay in them so long? You knew the truth. Sometimes a year or years before the physical breakup. You knew the truth. So from the moment you knew the truth to the moment that you finally said, I'm walking away, what happened between point A and point B? Why did you stay knowing you were going to be hurt? And see if you don't come to the same conclusion. Certainly, you'll personally dress it in different forms. But at the root of that pimple, what lays within? What rot sits within? And how does it track to each of your relationships? And it comes to, why do you allow yourself to be hurt and value the connection of someone hurting you more than you value your connection to yourself? Just so you can know, I'm not alone. So how important is relationships? Very. How important is connection? Very. It's an essential foundation on your social interactions of your life. And it is this need to be connected that gave birth to the ego. We spoke previously with a purpose to bring it back up here, set a foundation, give the information in tidbits so it can be adapted and not overwhelmed and given at once. We spoke on the birthing process. And we also gave you personally Mansour Dragon's Bane Majir, the conversation of what if? And there was a purpose with all of that. Now we tie it together. As a spirit, you take a body and you are being connected. Although perceptions still unclear, you are being connected, and now you find yourself in a body. And the first impulse is to connect, to reestablish connection. That which God created. Except strange enough, you can feel it as a baby. But those around you can't. A conundrum. How do I connect to them? They give me their attention. Coochie coo goo goo gaga. They invite me to communicate. But the space that I hold, they don't exist in. How do I communicate? And so you lower your frequency and vibration of energy to theirs to communicate, to connect, so that you are not alone. And so, when you do, it gives birth to the ego. Because how do you gain their acceptance? How is the little boy doing? What is a boy? And you learn. I have this penis. They point it out to you and then teach you how shameful it is and dirty. And you take that into your mask. They teach you the expectations. You play with the male dolls. Don't let me catch you stealing your sisters. And you take that into your mask. Why? Because you learned quick that if you do something outside the normal expectations of a sense of self that they are projecting upon you, they detach. They mentally and emotionally detach, and you suffer. You suffer the loss of connection. And what would you give up for that connection? To feel accepted. You become hyper-aware. You become paranoid as a state of being to make sure every action, every projection of self is within a certain set parameter. A parameter that we may also point out holds a certain energetic frequency, none of them having to do with being connected, does it?
It's a purposeful disconnection to fulfill the requirements to protect this image and maintain the mannequin.
We say wrong. Because you're doing it from the standpoint of disconnecting. And that is not what's happening here. You're doing it with the purpose of connecting, not disconnecting.
So this will be a point of me coming in for clarification. Why does it feel like I'm disconnecting from or ignoring the sticky notes, as we said in previous lessons, or ignoring the memos in order to fulfill my role in projecting this mannequin? Does that question make sense? Why would I give up certain things that I know are calling to me in order to stick with the rote, mundane crud that just serves to uphold an image that I want to maintain?
It makes perfect sense. Well said.
Yeah.
And a very good question. But again, you give the premise that the sticky notes means connection to you. It does not. Not here. Here. It does not. We speak of connection, and you say, what language do you speak? What are you talking about? And all of your attention, as we have said in previous lessons, is on others. We have said the basis of your social structures and reality is stealing energy from each other. All of this is done for connection because you believe you are not alone. So even if it is hurtful, your overwhelming desire, your greatest need is connection, because it is the way that which created us. It is built into us to be connected. It is like breathing. You don't think about it. You just do it. Everything we have been teaching is about being connected. And the truth of the matter is, when perceived clearly, you are still being something. It's how you're choosing to be connected that's in question. That becomes problematic. And we go back to the question we built the beginning of this lesson on. What are you willing to give up to feel connected? And in order to truly answer that question, we must lead you back to a place of extreme pain. Because within that is understanding what you're willing to give up. And we point again to the painful relationships where you knew it was over, but you still stayed a year or two later. You knew it was wrong. You knew it was painful. You knew all of these things. But you were unwilling to be alone. Within that was a fundamental choice. Fundamental. you're willing to allow yourself to be hurt, fully conscious of it. Same pattern over and over again. You can predict when it was going to come. Their mood swings, the hatefulness, the depressive, the shame and guilt. But when I come home, it's there waiting for me like a comfortable shoe that doesn't fit anymore. Or we should say an uncomfortable shoe that doesn't fit anymore. What you're not willing to do is take the shoe off. And why? What is the motive? And the motive is having a connection versus being alone. Because without that connection, what are you? It becomes a terrifying premise. If I'm not connected to the people around me, even if I love to hate it, can I prove I exist? It defines me. My pains, my struggles, what I must overcome. When's the next challenge? Do you see our point?
Yes.
And so, the birth of the ego is when this occurs and you start connecting in this way. What is the requirement to stay connected? A tricky question, but if you were listening to what we said you first have to do to connect, the answer lies within. What must the ego do to keep you connected?
From sitting here, it's creating the conditions that you have to meet.
And what are those conditions?
Who, what, where, when, why, thoughts and emotions.
Start moving it into energetic terms. Because as your head bobbed, it was because you know they don't really matter, but yet they keep being present, so they must have a purpose. Why would the ego constantly bring up who, what, where, why, and when from an energetic sense?
I'm getting out of the mental here, and I'm going with I'm connecting here. It's words are gonna fail me, but I'm gonna do my damnedest. It's a fix. Emotions happen. Stuff happens. There's no space and time with it. It's this sensation, this experience. And it vibrates in a certain way.
Yes.
And let's do a fun example. Let's do a good vibration or a good feeling. Well, this sensation, I know by fulfilling these criteria, I can re-experience that sensation. Mm-hmm. So, energetically, I can create a situation or set things up in a situation to repeat so that I can experience that energy again.
You got it. But saying it clearer for the rest to follow and understand. The ego is an energy valve. Its job is to keep you within a certain frequency. Which frequency, you might ask? Go on.
So it's like, I'm just going with it. As you're adjusting yourself in this physical life,
Mm-hmm.
you're recalibrating your frequency to latch onto your caregivers, whomever they may be.
Correct.
So it's that initial calibration, and that's your set values. And those values only change in accordance to staying connected, however that looks throughout the rest of your life. If it's a continued toxic family, you calibrate your later relationships to stay within that frequency. Hence, daddy issues, mommy issues, yada, yada, yada. However, if your caregivers, for example, are connected, you're more likely to calibrate your frequency to stay within that type of connection so that your later relationships at work, with friends, etc., match that frequency. And you stay within that, I hate saying higher, lower, but higher frequency. I'm just saying for the sake of convention. That makes sense. So what you're saying is our initial set point is as babes adjusting and calibrating our frequency to our caregivers. And that's why you're saying birth doesn't happen until like 8 years or something, 6 to 8 years later. I forgot what the time frame was. Because you're spending that time energetically calibrating and developing yourself and giving birth to an ego, which doesn't happen instantly. It happens once you're connected and locked on. This is the frequency that works in this family.
Correct.
I see. Okay.
And
hopefully that made sense.
you said it perfectly clear.
Okay.
And so, why we now go back to therapy as sanding down the rough edges. Because daddy issues, it teaches you to not feel as bad as you did. And so you pull the weed and you learn to maintain it, that then when the weed starts growing, you pull it quicker. You come out with coping mechanisms for the pain. And so when the weed starts growing, I know what that is. You've heard our sons say this. I don't need it to grow into a tree to know that it's an oak. I pull it when I see its beginning shoots. It teaches you coping mechanisms to deal with the reaction. But where is the actual root? And the root is in the collection of the birth of that particular ego of what you are. Now, the focus of this lesson is the impetus as to why, the motive, the engine that drives it, the obsession behind all the other obsessions, which is to not be alone and feel connected. If it's hurtful, it's still connected. if it's comfortable hurt, it's what I know. I know how to cope with this. I can deal with an alcoholic because I've been through this loop several hundred times.
Is it more appropriate to say familiar as opposed to comfortable? Or is that a topic for another discussion?
We mean comfortable.
Okay.
Because you are comfortable with your pain. Hence why it repeats. If you were uncomfortable with your pain, you would try a different one. But you don't, do you? Strange how you can go from here to there across this country and land someplace else and find people that take up the roles of what you left. What happened to the new life? Well, the issue is that you brought yourself along. There is new life. There was new life where you left, but you won't allow it because the root once was familiar. You are comfortable with that pain. How uncomfortable is it to learn a new pain? The new patterns associated with it. When someone comes along and has the issue of, well, let me critique what you're not doing with your job. Eye roll. Here we go again. But imagine the discomfort of someone coming along and saying, well, the problem is your skin tone. And that will be your next several bosses. Do you have any coping skills for that? Have you been to therapy for that? No. You haven't. You'd have to learn all over again. And we don't want that, do we? And so, you are comfortable with your pain. But again, that's not the focus. The focus is, what are you getting through it? Connection. What are you willing to give up to know you're not alone? Write that one down and watch the pages fill when you review your life. A truly uncomfortable journal section. And it's meant to be. It is meant to be. Because until you face yourself, until you're willing to deal with that issue, the root remains and the cycle continues. Within that comfortable pain is a state of being, a point of what you accept. Excuse us for moving, but his knees are hurting. So, a point of acceptance, a point of what you're willing to have happen repetitively. And if you drift too far, there's a new job. I could be making $40,000 more. It'd be all new responsibilities. They would take me on a much more serious level. Enter the ego. You're vibrating outside your range. You're not worth it. You're not qualified. You won't get it. Okay, you're vibrating back in the comfortable zone where you can function. Do we lie?
Mm-mm.
It is fulfilling its purpose.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the basis of the ego and its function and purpose, while $40,000 more, who would object to that, right? More responsibility, taken more seriously, having the excitement of learning more, having the excitement of stepping up professionally, working among those who are in that particular field more professional than you, but learning what it takes to be among them and achieve such things. These are the things you're taught you should go after. These are the things your parents taught you that you should achieve. Did they not? Go for more, be more, do more. Don't let anything stand in your way. If we had $1 every time that opportunity became before someone on this plane of existence, and they chose, no, I'll stick with what I have. You have watched our son go through this with lack of abundance repetitively, offered better opportunities, and he refused it because of obligations of where he was at.
That word again, obligation.
Which was really a choice to not be tested, to not learn, to not risk failure. We're talking fear here. And when that choice is accepted, reality is not challenged. You don't have to change. You don't have the new opportunities. You don't have the new energy where you are uncomfortable. You don't have to learn. Because everything is built on the premise of what you know. Shave and a haircut. 2 bits.
That's a really, really insightful definition of obligation. It's like a meta definition. It's getting to the energy of obligation. And it's the word itself is not just a definition. There's that energy of the premise of what was it he said? Everything's built off the premise
Of obligation.
of no obligation. Everything is built off of the premise of not needing to be uncomfortable, not needing to be challenged. Yeah.
Correct. And again, through the observer self, review your life and you will find this to be a fundamental factor of what you would call the victimization or karma, depending upon your viewpoint. Why does God hate me? Why do you hate yourself? You are God in motion. You can expand. You can learn. You can vibrate within a different frequency. what you are capable of is unlimited. And yet, repetitively over and over. And the thing of it is that the ego is doing its job of keeping you within a particular set vibration. And the purpose is to fit within your society, to fit within the social structures, to fit within the family units, friends, church, organizations. It's why you lie. You will stand before another individual and tell them a story like it's a truth. Why? Because I want to dress my mannequin. Yes, but what is the purpose behind it? So that they can accept me. Why is that acceptance so important? And what are you willing to give up for it? Do you see the weight of the question now?
Yes. More so. More so. I'll see the weight once I start afterwards.
And it does not make your need for connection bad. It does not need to be punished. It does not need to be stopped. It is a vital part of who and what you are, as what created us, as it made us.
Because to reject that is to reject the gift.
You reject yourself. And this will only lead to a spiral of shame and guilt. And to this we point to the individuals that say, that's my 7th bad relationship. I'm not going to get into another relationship. I'm going to spend time alone. And it's not from the motive of learning of oneself and learning to love oneself. It is from the motive
of I can't be hurt again.
And they go through a tailspin of shame and guilt, anxiety and pain, because they're not connected, they're not an island, they're pretending they are, and eventually, like an addict, they come out of hiding, and the next thing you know, we're getting married next month. Wait, when did you get together? And they're back at it, waiting for the next fall. And they go through the cycle again, self-loathing, and then reconnect anyway. We are made to be connected. It is not an issue of connection. It is a matter of how you are perceiving it. And watch the words we used clearly. It is a matter of how you perceive it. Perceiving it in the way that you do creates the matter that is around you. Do you not like the matter at hand? The physicality and the way that it operates? Change the perceptions. Not the weeds, the roots. What you think you are. What you think you're worth. Which leads us back to the emotional body. A collection of perceptions within time. That is generated to define who and what you are and the limitations from it that keep you within a certain set frequency. And what happens if you drift out of it within this group mind? Well, we have said that too. Your history proves it. If one drifts out of it and begins producing miracles, you worship them or you kill them. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Good.
I'm disappointed there's not going to be 17 lessons on this. This is you really are teaching a new way. It's looking at the matter from a perspective that a perspective that I would have never considered or even thought of, but it makes so much sense. And it's probably as I listen to this again and look through the notes again, it's going to be undeniable. And again, it's not me placing you on a pedestal, but it really is seeing these matters that are quintessential. And anyone who is interested in listening to this kind of stuff, it's quintessential in the process.
It is a new way.
Very much so. It's...
And one that is essential for each of you to grasp to move into this new energy you speak of. The old tools will not work. They will create energetic kickback using them. And so the new way is a way to work seamlessly with the energy present by releasing your G.I. Joe dolls. It is time for the children of humanity to become adults of humanity and see their minds in a clearer way, not as a decree, an invitation. You get a choice. And there are those who will grasp it, those who will mock it, and those who will deny it. But as we have stated, the new generation coming in is waiting for this information to be reminded of what they already know. And they come with a purpose. And that is why we are here. To give a choice to those present. To be able to say, on the level in which you vibrate and inhibit and speak real to you, and give you a choice. And each will choose. And now, back to the ego. In understanding its nature, and this is important, take a moment, clear your minds, take a deep breath, rub those feet on the carpet, ground yourselves into awareness, be present, Because what we are about to share is what all of this has been leading to. When it comes to discussing the ego, we have said that you deal with it as if you're dealing with a foe, something that must be conquered, abolished, removed, destroyed. And we have said there's not once you've ever done a fight with yourself where you've won. Not once. The ego is part of your mind. It has a purpose. We have also said and gave examples in previous lessons that who you were from 16 to 18 is not who you were 26 to 27, right?
Correct.
That the being you knew yourself as at that younger age, at some point in time, literally died. Aspects of memories and being remained, but the values and focuses of what it used to have meaning died, so that you can go into your 20s, and that it was spurred on during this process of a period of depression, a period of sadness, a period of disconnecting from the world, so you could figure out who you are. And we also pointed out that this could be a joyful process, but you must be conscious of it and move with it, versus the resistance of it occurring. Like you lost a great uncle and are at the funeral. So the ego obviously changes, does it not?
Mm-hmm.
Your life is proof of that. You may have resisted during the transition period, which made the change rougher, more painful, more mourningful, but nevertheless, it died. Did it not?
Mm-hmm.
So, how is that stranglehold of the ego? As all of the New Age philosophy would suppose. It is the one holding the keys. It is the one guarding the gate. It is what must be released in order to be clean-minded. And while we exaggerate the words, the essence of them is there. Even in what you study now, the essence of it is there. And so, did we not just say the ego died? How did that occur? We thought it was the great conqueror. If it did not want to die, shouldn't you be subjected to its will like the ego is seen? It has control over you. It infiltrates your mind even in your sleep. If it wants it a certain way, it will be that way. And you are the puppet dancing on the strings.
You're already separating from ego so much.
What do you mean?
You talk about ego being an aspect of the mind, but looking at everything we've been taught, it's taught in a way that disowning a part of you.
Correct. And why we use the expression, whenever you have fought yourself, you have never won the battle once.
And just you talking about it, in a way, it's funny, like right now, not a minute ago, but like now, it it's painful. It's like you're jabbing, like that. You're why you disgusted at a part of who I am, and now I probably will not be able to see anything written about ego in any spiritual context the same again.
Good.
And no, it's great. It's like it's you're really highlighting how much we villainize the ego.
And that is the point of these lessons. To no longer see it the same way. To fondly look at such teachings of, remember when we wore bell bottoms because it was stylish?
Is that why you're saying the old ways just don't work anymore because of the what they were teaching? This we eventually interpret it as villainizing an aspect of ourself, hence it causing so much damage, hence us needing a new way.
It is like getting into a car from the trunk and expecting it to move and be driven. That is not the purpose of the trunk. And there you are, creating a whole philosophy of why it makes sense to be in the trunk. You do not understand the tool before you. And so we are here to say, get out of the trunk, let's start there. That's where you put the luggage, the groceries, the spare tire. That is not its purpose. Come over here behind the wheel. Let us explain its purpose. Let us explain what this key does, what these levers on the floor does. That it comes with options to adjust to make it comfortable to sit to reach all. And if we have time, the fact that there's a radio might be nice. We come to teach the purpose of the tool. It is time for you to know. That does not make the old teachings wrong. As we said, you will eventually grow to look at them as bell-bottom pants. Can you imagine? We wore those and thought we looked good. Make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Then let us continue. And so, the ego does die. What happened from 16 to 18 into the 20s? That it died. And a new one was born.
I'd say typically, generally you leave the comfort and structure of the public school system and you either go work, look for work, or go to less structured schooling and training.
So whether you like it or not, translating this into energetic terms, you're forced out of one vibration and into a new one that has whole new expectations.
That aren't clearly defined. Whereas before you had, for all intents and purposes, expectations clearly laid out. And you'll see this again with school grads or career students that graduate and finally go into the workforce.
Mm-hmm.
Things aren't as laid out and nebulous, or aren't as laid out and structured as before.
Correct. But the important part of it is that they're forced into a new pool and say swim.
Mm-hmm.
They're forced to adapt. They're forced to go through changes. Now, that's the fertilizer and the dirt for the new ego. Because again, what's its purpose? To make sure you function. And if the ego had such powers as it's been attributed to it, that it does what it wants to do, it is the gatekeeper, it blocks you. If it had no love for you as a being, if it was its will and you are the puppet on the strings, then why would it let go of the old 16 to 18-year-old self? And this leads us back to the point of connection. A 16 or 18-year-old self can connect in the world that is now within. It finds itself overwhelmed, ignorant, innocent, naive. And so it signals something to the ego. My purpose is no longer being fulfilled. In order to fill that purpose, I must adapt. And so just like from age 1 to age 7, of calibrating a new mask and the uncomfortability of that process, so begins from 19 until 20-something, depending on how fast someone moves through it. You just watched your sisters go through this, yes?
Still going through it. That's who I've been thinking about, like, for most of the time.
And they haven't clearly developed themselves, and they are awkward. Like birds whose feathers have not fully come out to show the beauty. It looks bony versus fluffy. They are still going through it. Their old ego is dying and the new one is being born. And with that is periods of depression and darkness. Common. Natural. But the point is, the ego surrendered because it was required to. The motive behind the requirement is still the need to be connected. To connect to the new world. To not be alone. To reharmonize to a new frequency to communicate. Do you see it?
I was processing something else, so no.
Okay.
Sorry, I wrote a note and I was just processing like a tangent thought before I lost it.
Did you hear what we said previously?
Not the last 30 seconds.
That the motive behind it ultimately is still the need to be connected, to reharmonize to a new frequency, to be able to communicate and belong. Do you see it?
But now it's a different context, a different world, a different reality. Your perception shifted, the matter's changed.
And so now we bring up the question. The essential one that no one will believe and think absurd and insane if your desire to connect was can change from 18 to the 20s, and the ego goes with. What if an individual focused on communion as the means to connect?
The ego will adapt.
And not object?
Not object, because you still have to function. And the ego is doing its job.
Correct.
Hence the idea of a false ego.
And now we go to the point that we said, make sure you pay attention to what we are saying. We go back to the example of our son when he was in that meditation and he had reached a certain state of beginning of awareness, the bliss, it's called, and the thoughts and emotions recede. And he now sees what they are reacting to. And with that communion energy connection coming through, they flowed with that energy to match it and calmed. And he was in that state of what is. And then he became aware of a disturbing energy within. And he heard the voice. Head towards it. What did we say was his first reaction?
He was disturbed at what he saw.
His first reaction was, I don't think I want to. He didn't know what was waiting for him, but he can sense it. And his first reaction to the voice was, oh, I don't think so. Do you remember?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. What was that? Oh, I don't think so.
Was that his ego? Yeah, it was his ego. Like, hold on. Not in the job description. No. Let's stay away.
And why?
Because that's not what it was. That's not what it was vibrating towards. That's not what it was calibrated for. It would have to recalibrate itself.
And his vibrational reality would break.
Yeah.
And so stay within your safe zone. Now, we talk about the three aspects of the mind. The spiritual mind, the lower mind, that you call the ego, and the observer self. If you check the example, all three were present. The divine mind, go towards it. The lower mind, oh, I don't think so. And who was observing it all? All three aspects of the mind, same place at the same time. And what broke the fear that was overtaking him? Nothing can hurt me. And he got to the source of the energy and was revolted by its feel of what it is. And again, nothing can hurt me. And he entered it. And it tried to overwhelm him. And he recognized it was the essence of being, of thoughts and emotions, of all the rejection he had faced as a child. Not other lives. This life. Why he was unworthy, why God did not love him, why his parents rejected him. And he faced it and said, no, This is the essential point we wish to bring to your attention. The lower mind, the ego, did its job. You don't need to see that. Vibrate in your safe space. The divine mind did its job. Head towards it. Go on. It's okay. But where was the seat of power?
The observer self.
What warped the reality?
The act of will from the observer self. What are you willing
To have happen here? And when he made his mind clear, did the ego fight him?
No, you willed it. The ego said, all right, I'll recalibrate. Beep, beep, boop, boop, bop. And it recalibrated.
And it came from him listening to
The divine mind.
but the seat of power that changed and warped reality came from
The observer self that enacted the will.
you can change reality as it is. It is not a matter of the ego. The ego is your friend. But if you continue to act towards it like you were wounded, it will continue doing what it's doing. You are not wounded. You are not broken. And you are not incomplete. And as long as you continue taking that role with it, it will continue to try to nurse you, to keep you safe by being within a particular frequency.
Is this why it's difficult for some people to let go of their parents?
Correct.
Is it for pretty much the same thing, except instead of this non-physical ego, it's physical people. But they play the same role, like a safety officer or a nurse.
I feel lost.
Or a therapist
I
come here.
feel alone because you can't connect to them anymore. It's been removed. So now what? My structure of connection, of support, has been removed. Death of an ego. Years of depression, darkness, chaos, and an eventual emergence back into life. But our point, and the essential one at that, is that all of these structures, all of these teachings that you have been taught about how you need to pray to your highest self, you need to defeat your ego. No. 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 You are the seat of power. And we have said over and over again, you do not take conscious responsibility for your life. This is what we speak of. You play wounded bird, and the ego acts accordingly. You are not wounded. It is there to aid you, and you get a choice. You can choose to continue connecting because whether you like it or not, you will always seek connection. Always. Most people these days are so distraught with connecting with another human being that they've replaced them with pets. They refuse to connect with their other brothers and sisters and only feel safe with pets as a connection, who eventually pass and they're distraught or quickly replace them with another. You cannot get rid of your need for connection. It is how we were made. We know our purpose and we work with. This is an invitation for you to take conscious responsibility of yours, but also to understand you don't need to keep it in a certain frequency that no longer serves you. You can choose to connect to that which is its purpose. And now, as promised, we address what you said in the kitchen, and then we will end this meeting because his legs are truly troublesome tonight.
Yes. We'll work on some stretches and flexibility.
And so, you said in the kitchen that the more you are learning to connect, you understood why our son chose not to and choose to step out of it to reconnect to what was here, the normal group mind function, because of that feeling of sadness, the feeling of being alone. It is a process. When you disconnect from the group mind, as we had shared in earlier meetings, and the process begins, at that point in time, there is a feeling of loneliness and sadness that comes with it. Because again, your essence is what? Connection. To be connected. So in the midterm, as we use the example with you of being on the platform on fire, we wait in anticipation to see how much pain it will take before you leap to the next bar. This is what we were speaking of. Because what comes next is a connection to yourself. And through that, to everything around you. Connection as it was truly meant to be. Something that can't be explained must be experienced. But that moment of connection, for example, that we used when you get to the top of the mountain and you're shocked in awe of the vastness of the planet you call Earth and the beauty that it contains, that it just quiets the thoughts and the emotions, and you're lost in for one moment, beautiful moment, the experience of the energy that is moving through that matter, and just a pure state of being hardly describes when you take conscious responsibility for it as a state of being. That was approaching the front porch. Then there's opening the door, being in the foyer, and then exploring the house within. As someone said, there are many rooms rooms to my father's mansion. There are many states of mind and being, and understand what is it that triggers the need to release the body experience. Is that you become connected to what is around you in harmony as a state of being. And as promised in our book and previous lessons, where does this eventually lead you? To being connected to your other brothers and sisters. And naturally, as did the channel, assume that we meant those who are physical. We never said that, did we?
No.
And with that connection, like a